Hangar deck, leveler. Half an hour out from Kemla.
Anakin had put it off for as long as he could, but now he had to face it. He clambered around the interior of the CR-20, making notes on his data pad and imagining how the ship might be better adapted for the Grand Army. A fleet of these would be useful, larger than a LAT/I, hyperdrive capable, well armed. Just the job for inserting troops when an acclimator was far too big and a Larty was too small or the range too great. Good option for special forces, perhaps, he thought. His interest was genuine, but he admitted to himself that the examination was distraction from what was eating at him. Altus. He felt the man coming. He didn't leave an impression in the Force like any Jedi Master Anakin had known, except perhaps for that sense of uneasy curiosity that felt almost familiar. Anakin waited until he heard Altus's boots on the metal ramp before he turned around. "I'm sorry about your men, General," Altus said. "Yes, we lose far too many." Anakin put the datapad away. There was no point trying to fool Altus into thinking he wasn't rattled by his eccentric ways, and by one way in particular. "I know Rex is especially disturbed. I'll talk to him later. He tends to prefer a little space at times like these." "And at times like these, no doubt you see the wisdom of avoiding attachment. Growing too fond of someone is a certain route to pain for one of you." Does he know? It was Anakin's first thought. He almost panicked. Altus wasn't like other Jedi. He might have been able to sense all kinds of things that even Obi-Wan, even Yoda, couldn't. His followers could do things that no other Jedi seemed able to. The affinity with machines, with computers. Anakin was a gifted mechanic, but Callista could live the machine. It was almost alarming. Not half as alarming as thinking that Altus might know about Padme, though. Rex regrets the brevity of their lives, as do I. Altus looked a little younger now. He'd changed his posture subtly, no longer clasping his hands above his belly, but hands on hips. It transformed him from a sage into a veteran soldier somehow. Anakin knew he wasn't dealing with a lightweight. "General Skywalker, I knew Qui-Gon Jinn. Extraordinary man. He certainly made a big impression on me. I sense what's troubling you." "Oh? What do I say?" He'd never tell anyone, of course. I feel it. "It's quite a list. It's not wrong to have disagreements with the Jedi Council. Qui-Gon had his differences with them, as do I. It's not necessarily a bad thing." "Master, how many students have you taught?" Altus shrugged and looked off to one side as if calculating. "Probably thousands. I'm a traditionalist. I keep it simple. No point being more complex than we need to be. So I teach being good, doing good, and asking good questions. That's about it, really." Anakin almost gasped. He felt stupid for being shocked, but he'd had no idea how many followers Altus might have. Now he knew. This wasn't a tiny sect of lunatics. Altus smiled. It wasn't smug. It was regretful. It was as if he felt he was too late for something. "Aren't you going to ask me what you really want to know, young man?" It was Anakin's only chance. He knew he was unlikely to see much of Altus again, if ever. Altus seemed to know that too. He appeared to be giving farewell advice, and he didn't look like the kind of man who did that out of habit. "Would you answer me if I did?" "Of course." "Are you married?" Altus tilted his head slightly to one side. "I lost my wife some years ago. I miss her terribly. I was a better Jedi for her influence, too." "Attachment hasn't turned you to the dark side, clearly, nor any of your followers." "Now we might get to your real question." Anakin almost broke. He felt such compassion, such honesty and humility in Altus that he wondered if he could safely confide in him. It wasn't fear of Altus exposing his secret marriage that scared him, though. He was scared that once he discussed his turmoil openly, then he could never cope with being a Jedi, his kind of Jedi, Obi-Wan's kind of Jedi, again. And he had no idea where that might lead. "I'm not sure I have one," Anakin said.
Well, if I give you an answer, then you needn't feel you betrayed your masters by asking one.
Altus sat down on one of the bulkhead safety rails.
I don't know why Master Yoda or any of the other Jedi Council members rarely prepare their followers for the fact that we exist and yet haven't fallen prey to the dark side. It's certainly true for many beings, Force users or not. But their problem isn't attachment. Their problem is obsession.
Altus paused for a moment. Anakin felt he was being searched somehow, his thoughts probed.
So, before I could tell you if attachment was right for you, you would have to ask yourself if you could handle it, Jedi or not.
Anakin was now ready to slam the ramp shut if anyone looked like wandering in and cutting this conversation short. He had to know more. He had to be able to understand so that he didn't go back to Coruscant overwhelmed by the urge to confront Yoda. "How would I tell if I could handle it, Master?"
Altus shrugged. Could you let someone go if you loved them? Could you let them walk away? Could you live without them? How far would you go to stop them from leaving? What would you do to save them? Ask yourself, listen, and if any of your answers make you feel afraid, attachment may be fraught with misery for you and those around you.
It was simple. Altus said he liked to keep things uncomplicated, and, like all simple things, it was hard to do. Anakin still couldn't tell if Altus knew about Padme, but he certainly knew about attachment, and he gave the impression that he knew Anakin struggled with it. Maybe he also knew that Anakin struggled with the knowledge that he had failed to save those dearest to him. Well, Anakin wanted the truth. He was prepared to be scrutinized. "You really are a very good teacher, Master Altus."
"Not really," he said. "I just know how to ask questions. My students give me the answers. So I am, in fact, a student. I always will be. The oldest Padawan in town. Now, may I ask you a question?"
"Certainly."
"They call you the Chosen One. Do you feel chosen?"
"Not really." Altus had a way of disarming him. He wasn't sure he'd have said that to anyone except Padme. "I feel different. I don't quite fit in. I try. Maybe I started too old."
"Callisto is older than you are now when she became my Padawan. I think some life experience can make a better Jedi. But I wouldn't want you, or Master Yoda, to think I was trying to lure you to our little community. I don't seek recruits."
Altus looked deadly serious now. Anakin knew exactly what he was saying, weighing his words as carefully as a man could.
"But if you ever get kicked out of the temple, remember you can always find us. We never close."
He got up, made a few grunts of pain, and put both palms flat on the small of his back.
"I can sense your Padawan coming," he said. "She's had a bit of a culture shock meeting us. I'm sorry if that causes you problems. Just tell her we're harmless nuts if it starts to become a problem."
"How does anyone find you?" Anakin asked. He had to ask, even if it was obliquely put. "I'd never heard of your community, although Qui-Gon mentioned you by name." Altus touched 2 fingers in his brow in a mock salute.
"Just look in the unhappy places everyone else forgets," he said. "We'll be there, doing what we can."
Then he walked down the ramp, still rubbing his back ruefully.
"Don't forget to ask yourself those questions, General."
Anakin found himself staring at the open bay door long after Altus had vanished. Maybe there was a solution after all. The old master seemed to have more answers than he admitted to. Could I live without her? Would I let her go? Anakin felt uneasy, as if he were looking down into a well with his hands firmly on the sides, but starting to slip as he stared in dismay at something emerging from the depths. He pulled back. maybe this wasn't the time to ask himself those kinds of questions. Not here in the aftermath of battle. He'd leave it until he had a quiet moment to meditate. That sense of not wanting to look was misleading. It had to be. Altus couldn't be right about everything, after all. Anakin decided the first thing he'd do when Leveler dropped out of hyperspace was to calm Padme and tell her. She'd never want to leave him anyway, nor would he ever leave her. Altus's question didn't really apply. Did it?